Everybody, this stream. Today we have a nice 7-game slate here on DraftKings and Fanduel. This slate's a little bit better than what we've had the last couple of weeks, for sure. It's one of the better slates I've seen, just because there's not that many injuries. I mean, there are some, for sure, but it seems a lot more manageable today. The only real downside on the slate is pricing is not really as good as it's been for some guys, but overall, it's still a decent slate. I will be playing a full complement of games on both DraftKings and FanDuel today. Hopefully, the injury situation doesn't devolve into chaos like it did the other day. With that said, we've been winning most days, so that's what we like. And let's get into this injury report here. Before I do that, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel. So for the Miami Heat, like half the team is probable, including Tyler Hero and Butler and a couple other guys. So just keep that in mind. That's the team we're gonna have to watch. For the Nets, Claxton is questionable and O'Neal is out. For the Wizards, Beal is out and Morris is questionable. For the Hawks, Murray and Collins are both out and Bogdanovich is doubtful. For the Grizzlies, Morant and Adams are both questionable and Bane is out. For the Mavericks, Doncic is probable and Cleaver is questionable. For the Cavs, Mitchell and Love are questionable. For the Spurs, Socken is questionable and Podol is out. For the Timberwolves, Towns is out and McLaughlin is doubtful. And for the Celtics, Horford is out. And for the Clippers, Powell is out. Both the Clippers and the Heat are teams we're going to have to pay attention to see if they're going to have any changes in the injury report close to the game. For the most part, though, it looks like a pretty solid slate when it comes to who we know is going to play and who isn't. So that's definitely nice on a 7-game slate for a change. With that said, let's get into the players I do like. Now, I really only have one player that's a super lock option here, is Denny Avdija. He's just been playing extremely well lately, and his price point is still a little bit cheap for what he's been doing. The reason this price point, I think, stays in this range is because he tends to occasionally have a really bad game, especially when full complement of players are good for the Wizards. However, they still have some guys out, so he's still going to be starting, and he's going to have plenty of opportunity, going to get a lot of minutes, and so he's one of my favorite plays on this particular slate. There's a lot of other guys that are kind of borderline, but they just quite didn't make the cut because they didn't have either upside or minutes or anything like that, or they're waiting on injury situations. So let's get into players I do like today. D'Angelo Russell is the first guy for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He was very close to being a core play. He's just been playing really solid lately, especially with Towns, excuse me, out. I look for that to continue here, though his price point has popped up a little bit. So that's hurt him slightly when it comes to becoming a core play, just because his ceiling is in the mid 40s. If he was a mid 50s ceiling, I'd probably like it a little bit more. But he's been hitting in the around 40 most games lately, so I expect him to continue that trend. Then we'll look at Mr. Brogdon for the Boston. He's just been playing pretty well. He just came back from injury, but he's capped on minutes because he's in a timeshare with Marcus Smart. But he's been playing extremely well lately. He really hadn't had too many bad games, even all season. But his price point has come down slightly, which makes him viable on the slate. Then we'll look at Tyrese Halliburton, and I really wanted to put him as a core player as well, but just the pure situation that he's in, team he's going up against, is the only issue here. Indiana is a high-scoring team, but they're playing one of the slowest paced teams on the slate, so that does have a little bit of an issue. And Halliburton has been kind of hobbled, but he's had some really good games the last few against plus situations. So I expect him to have a really good game here. I don't think 50 fantasy points is out of the question, but you do have to consider the fact that it's a tougher game situation. And even though he's had 50 fantasy point games against Miami this season, it's still a tough game, a slower paced game. So that kept him from being a lock. But then we'll look at Marcus Smart for Boston against Clippers. The Clippers should have most of their guys back, but Marcus Smart's been playing extremely well. He's not a guy I typically like to roster, but when there's not a ton of value options available, you're going to have to find some lower priced players occasionally, and he's going to be one of the guys to take a look at. He's been playing really well. Obviously, they have a couple injuries on their team, but they're with Horford out, but he's been playing a consistent amount of minutes regardless, and so I do like him on this particular slate, especially in this matchup. And then we're going to look at Tyler Hero, who's actually probable, not questionable according to the injury report, but he has been playing really solid lately. The only reason he's not a lock either is because his price point is shot up to $8,000. That's about as high as it's been all season. I think he's had one game all season close to that. So he is a little bit risky as a result of that, but he is playing against Indiana, which is one of the faster scoring or faster paced teams and worst defensive teams on the slate. So I do like him in this matchup, assuming he ends up playing. Of course, I already talked about Evija. So then we're going to look at Kyle Anderson for Minnesota. Now, his price point is not super ideal here, but he's been playing really well with Towns out, and so I look for that to continue. He's had one bad game with Towns out. Other than that, he's been close to 30 or over 40 in every other game, so let's see if we can get that to continue. Obviously, his price makes him a little less a lock, though, on the situation. Then we'll look at Kyle Kuzma for the Wizards. He's just been playing extremely well lately, especially with Beal out. He's getting more usage and he's getting a lot of shot opportunities. And this is a situation where he's going to get more. Obviously, Brooklyn's a pretty good defensive team, and they should have most of their guys back today. But I still think he's a good player and a good option on the slate. Then Jaren Jackson Jr. from Grizzlies. He's just been playing really well too, and if some of the guys are still out for them, that would definitely give him a boost. But he's just been pretty solid lately. He does have some up and downs, but overall he's been pretty good once he's been getting at least 30 minutes a game. Then we'll look at Oniki and Okongwu sorry for butchering your name, for the Atlanta Hawks. Against Memphis, this is a little bit of a trouble spot, but he's been playing extremely consistent for the most part in the last 5 or 6 games, especially with Collins out, and so I look for him to continue that here. Him and Capella are playing good together. Then Rudy Gobert for Minnesota. He's been playing surprisingly well the last 3 games with Towns out. Before that, he didn't play well, but his minutes are now hitting the mid-30s in these games, and he seems like he's a little bit more like himself. He's been very efficient scoring the ball, also getting lots of rebounds. So if he can continue that here in a nice plus matchup against Portland, then I expect that I almost wanted him to be a lock. So he was, he's kind of borderline just, but his season situation has left it hard to make him a lock. And then we're going to look at Clint Capella, who's been playing really solid the last few games, and his price point is still too cheap for what his potential here is in this matchup, especially against Memphis. He's been playing really well, and I look for that to continue. He's a double-double machine now, especially with Collins out, where he's a little bit more locked in minutes-wise. So that's what I have for DraftKings. I really think it's a pretty decent slate. It's not great because of the pricing, but again, with less injuries, it's definitely more viable. So here over on FanDuel, we're going to take a look at Deni Avdija first. Obviously, his price point's a little bit higher here on FanDuel than DraftKings, but he's been playing really well lately, and I think he's the only lock on the slate. There are a couple guys that feel a little bit better here on FanDuel than DraftKings, but overall, I think it's pretty similar in this when it comes to the pricing not being super ideal between the slates. But we'll look at D'Angelo Russell here for the Minnesota. Now, his price point is not super ideal here on FanDuel, but he has some upside here, and he's been playing solid with the with injuries to Towns here for Minnesota, so I look for him to continue that in a faster-paced game. Then we're going to look at Luka, assuming he ends up playing today. He's been out, but he should have a pretty good opportunity here. He does need 60 fantasy points to 5x, but he really has the opportunity to do that here in this plus matchup against Oklahoma City. Then we'll look at Tyrese Halliburton. Now, he's got some nice upside in this matchup, even though it's a tougher matchup for him. The only reason he's not a lock is because it's against Miami, who's a slow-paced team. But overall, he's been playing really well lately, and I expect that to continue here now that he's back to full strength. Marcus Smart looks interesting at his price point here. He's been playing pretty solid, especially for FanDuel. He gets more points for the steals and stuff, which he does tend to get. He has bigger opportunity on this particular slate. Obviously, his price point is not super ideal, but it's viable on this particular slate. Now, I haven't really talked about Kawhi Leonard before this season because he has not played very much, but his price point is cheap enough here that if he's set to play a full complement of minutes, then he'll have some opportunity to hit it. However, he's only done that, I think, twice all season long, so or maybe even once all season long, so you do have to keep that in mind, but his price point is down, which definitely gives him some viability here on FanDuel. Jalen Brown, also really like him today. His price point's been really good this season, and he's been playing extremely well lately, especially with Horford out. He's getting a little bit extra. He's going for some more rebounds, and so I think he's a great option on the slate. Kyle Anderson also looks interesting here on FanDuel as well. He's been playing well with Towns out. He's not super ideal because of his price point, but he is viable on the slate. And then Kristaps Porzingis for Washington. Now, this is a tough matchup against Brooklyn, but he's been playing really well with Beal out, and I look for that to continue. He had some really monster games last week, and hopefully he will have some big monster games this week as well. Then we'll look at Kyle Kuzma, who's in a similar situation for with Porzingis. It's kind of a 1-2 punch with these two guys, and he's just been playing really well with Beal out, and I look for that to continue as well. Then at center, we got Clint Capella for the Hawks, who has been playing well without Collins in their lineup due to injury, so I look for him to continue to play great, and he's at a good price point here on FanDuel. And then Rudy Gobert, who the last 3 games he's been playing extremely well for them, for Minnesota, especially with Towns out. However, before that he was not playing well at all, so you do have to make that consideration. But overall, he's played solid. He's had 2 double-doubles in the last 3 games, and he's been scoring a lot of points. He's had 2 50 fantasy point games. At this price point, it's just way too cheap for what his potential is. And so I think he's viable on the slate. He was nearly a lock if it weren't for the fact that he just hasn't played well most of the season. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. If there's any guys that you think I left out, feel free to leave those below. And have a nice day, guys.